Hi, my name is Xiaowen Xu. I am an assistant professor in the Department of Psychological Sciences at William Mary. I have been at William Mary since fall 2018, so almost 4 years at this point. Before that, I actually moved here from Canada. So I did my undergraduate degree, my master's, PhD, and my postdoc, all in social personality psychology, all at the University of Toronto, up north in Canada. Yeah, so my work here at William Mary research-wise, primarily I study how people's personalities and dispositions and their goals and motivations, how all of that influences differences in people's political ideologies. And I'm also really interested in understanding how differences in people's ideology play out in different social outcomes and situations in life. So some of this work, so I got first interested in this kind of research back when I was doing my PhD, where, well, I didn't go into my PhD wanting to study political ideology, but one of the things I started doing was just measure people's political ideologies in all my research. And then I started noticing that, hey, actually all of the really cool, interesting stuff that I find are always kind of related to differences in political ideologies, and I thought, hey, why not study this? So some of my PhD research dealt with primarily understanding just like how people's personality traits. So these are just how we are as people. Like you see, so some people who are like they're really organized. Some people they're really open to new ideas. Some people are really like nice, friendly, others are really outgoing, or some people might be like, a little bit edgy and anxious, right? And these are just general traits that we have that we use to describe, you can use that to describe yourself, we might use it to describe people we know. And these are traits that aren't necessarily politically charged per se, but and there's actually a lot of research in my lab and other labs show that these traits actually are consistently, reliably linked to differences in ideology. So some of my work, we found, for instance, that people who are more conscientious, so these are people who are they're more organized, they're more goal-driven, they're more tidy and structured, they tend to endorse more conservative political beliefs, whereas people who are more kind of like open to new experiences and new ideas, they tend to be a little bit more liberal. So my work, what I have done is I kind of took this a step further. So I tried to understand more like, well, what is it about these personality traits? So like, how do you, for example, go from being organized and tidy to say being really conservative, right? Like, how does that happen? So one of the research studies I've done is I looked at how people's personality relates to their preferences for different types of media and their just general consumption of like media products, so like books, movies, music, TV, and all sorts of stuff. And we find that there's stable relationships between the kinds of media that people consume and how that relates to differences in personality, and then how that kind of then leads to differences in ideology. And then since coming to William Mary, one of the things I've been really, really excited about at William Mary is actually working with the students here, like the undergraduate students, on different studies where we kind of expand this kind of research. So I think I'll talk a little bit about some of the recent work I've done with students at William Mary. So a recent study I've done was with one of my undergraduate honors thesis student. She is now I think she's at Hofstra University now doing her master's. So we looked at basically how differences in personality related to how people endorse and support diversity initiatives in the workplace. So we find that people who are more open to experience, who are more agreeable, these are individuals who tend to be more supportive of workplace diversity initiatives, and these are people who actually more actively engage in these kinds of diversity initiatives and so on. So this paper we actually now published in a really, really cool journal in Personality and Social Psych Bulletin, and this is like basically a completely student-driven research. So my student, she came into literally to my office and was like, well, Professor Xu, I kind of really want to do this kind of work. This sounds like something you might be interested in. And I was like, yeah, let's go for it. And we did that, and it was a really, really cool study from the beginning to the end. Like my student, she set up pretty much everything, like she spearheaded everything, and it was one of the really cool examples of just like undergraduate research that students can get involved in, like in my lab. And another study that we actually are currently in the process of publishing is another study I did with another undergraduate honors thesis student where we looked at different components of conservatism. So one of the things my collaborators and I have done is we looked at how the idea of like when we talk about conservatism, right, there's different ways we think about what a conservative person is like. And one of the things we found is that, at least in our work, we find that conservatism can kind of sort of break down to like sort of these three separate dimensions, where one of the dimensions is more characterized by people who really believe in more like kind of libertarian, kind of, small government, decrease government kind of like interference kind of beliefs. We also have people who are more kind of like, these are more like morally traditional. So these are individuals who endorse more traditional views on, say, like roles of like religion or like gender roles and things like that. And then we also have what we would call kind of like individuals who kind of base their ideologies more on kind of like ethnic differences, so kind of like in-group, out-group, how much we should support things like foreign aid and immigration. So one of the things my students, we ended up looking at is how these kind of like different ideological conservative ideologies relate to support for COVID-19 safety precautions. And we found that overwhelmingly, even accounting for things like differences in personality, how much people see COVID-19 as like a legitimate threat, things like people's actual like age, gender, like just basic demographics, right? We find that people who tend to be more libertarian in their beliefs are the ones who not only were less supportive of COVID-19 safety precautions, but they also engaged in less COVID-19 precautions. So they were less likely to wear masks, they were less likely to social distance, and they were more hesitant about like supporting vaccines and things like that. So this is a really, really cool study that really offers a lot of insights into, why some people may or may not be inclined to follow safety precautions during the COVID-19 pandemic. And this was done with another one of my honors thesis students, and we're currently in the process of writing that up as well. So as you can see, one of the things I absolutely love about Will Mary is the really strong, motivated, dedicated students who are really excited about research. And in my lab, I've had the fortune to really work with a lot of really, really amazing students who come in with their own ideas that are kind of related to what I do in my lab, in my research programs. And we kind of just made it happen. We like made studies happen where we find really, really interesting, new, exciting findings. So moving forward, one of the things I really love to do at Will Mary is, again, continue my research looking at ideology to really look at just, how, again, differences in ideology impact different things in our lives. So one of the studies I'm currently working on, that I'm hoping to start working on in my lab, again, with amazing groups of undergrads, is one of the projects we're working on is looking at basically whether or not there are sort of like differences in political ideology and how that relates to anti-vaccination efforts. And we're also looking at how differences in political ideology might lead people to respond differently to like different kinds of marketing campaigns. So especially marketing campaigns that are kind of like politically or socially charged. So if you think of any kind of like ads by like, I don't know, Pepsi or like Dove, like when they had these kind of like ads that are very kind of like social justice involved, like how do people actually respond to these? So are these ads actually effective, or do they actually make people feel more turned off by that product? So we're kind of starting research to kind of look at just, again, how ideology and individual differences and personality could relate to these different outcomes. And going forward, I'm, again, really excited to keep working with the amazing undergrads at Will & Mary on all of these kinds of research studies.